Someone was in her apartment. Rebecca didn't know it. Not while she filmed her evening cooking video on November 3rd, 2016. Not while she chopped vegetables and laughed at her own jokes for her tiny YouTube audience. Not while she stood 20 feet from her bedroom, completely alone in her locked apartment in Minneapolis. But the camera knew. At timestamp 14:37, in the mirror reflection behind her left shoulder, a shadow passes across her bedroom doorway. Tall, human, deliberate. Rebecca lived alone. Her door was locked. She'd checked it twice. Building security would later confirm no one entered her floor that evening. Police found no forced entry, no fingerprints, no evidence anyone else had been inside. Yet there it is, preserved in digital clarity. Someone moving through her home while she remained oblivious. Here's what makes it worse. This wasn't the first time. When police reviewed her previous videos, months of casual evening vlogs, they found it again. And again. August 22nd, September 9th, October 1st. Always the same shadow. Always in the mirror reflection. Always while Rebecca filmed. Unaware. Something had been inside her apartment for months. Watching her. Moving through her space. Captured only by the camera's unblinking eye. Rebecca deleted her channel 3 days after the discovery. She broke her lease within a week and fled to Oregon. The Minneapolis Police Department closed the case as unresolved after 6 weeks of investigation that uncovered nothing. No suspect, no entry method, no explanation. But the question remains, frozen in that footage, what was in Rebecca Lawson's apartment? And the more terrifying question no one wants to ask, is it watching someone else right now? Drop a comment if you've ever felt watched in your own home, and hit subscribe, because the story gets darker. Rebecca Lawson was exactly the kind of person you'd never expect to become the center of an unexplained mystery. She worked in marketing for a mid-sized healthcare company, maintained a small circle of close friends, and lived in a modern apartment complex in the uptown neighborhood of Minneapolis, the kind of building with key fob entry, security cameras in common areas, and a management company that responded promptly to maintenance requests. Her third-floor unit overlooked a quiet courtyard. Her neighbors were young professionals like herself, polite, busy, largely anonymous in the way city dwellers often are. Rebecca had started her YouTube channel in early 2015, inspired by the lifestyle vlogging trend that was gaining momentum across the platform. Her content was unremarkable in its ordinariness. That was, in fact, the appeal. She filmed herself cooking simple meals, sharing skincare routines, discussing books she'd read and podcasts she'd discovered. Her subscriber count hovered around 300, mostly friends, family, and colleagues who enjoyed the casual intimacy of her videos. She wasn't trying to build an audience or monetize her content. The channel was simply a digital diary, a way to document her life during a period of transition. She'd recently ended a 4-year relationship and moved into her own apartment for the first time since college. The camera, she later told police, made her feel less alone during evening hours that once would have been spent with her partner. November 2016 had been an unremarkable month leading up to that fateful evening. Rebecca followed her usual routines: work during the day, gym 3 evenings a week, occasional dinners with friends. She'd filmed and uploaded 2 videos earlier in the month without incident, a makeup tutorial and a review of a cookbook she'd purchased. Both videos were straightforward, cheerful, entirely ordinary. The evening of November 3rd began like any other. Rebecca arrived home from work around 6:15 p.m. as confirmed by building security footage showing her entering through the main lobby. She collected her mail, took the elevator to the 3rd floor, and let herself into apartment 3F. The hallway camera captured her entering alone, the door closing firmly behind her. No one else appeared in the corridor that evening between 6 and 8 p.m. Inside her apartment, Rebecca went through her established evening routine. She changed out of her work clothes into comfortable loungewear, gray sweatpants, and an oversized college sweatshirt. She poured herself a glass of white wine. She set her Canon Vixia camcorder on its tripod in her living room, positioning it to capture her kitchen and dining area in the frame. This was her typical setup, one she'd used dozens of times before. At 6:47 p.m., she pressed record. The video that would later upend her life began unremarkably. Rebecca smiled at the camera, welcomed her tiny audience, and announced her plan to make butternut squash soup while discussing a book she'd just finished. Her demeanor was relaxed, her commentary casual and unscripted. She moved easily between her kitchen counter and stove, chopping vegetables and stirring ingredients while maintaining a running conversation with the camera. She filmed for 23 minutes continuously. During that time, she exhibited no signs of awareness that anything was amiss. She didn't pause, didn't look over her shoulder, didn't react to any sounds or movements outside the frame. To any viewer, and indeed to Rebecca herself while recording, this was simply another cozy evening at home, narrated for a small audience of people who cared about her daily life. The recording ended at 7:10 p.m. Rebecca turned off the camera, ate her soup while watching television, and spent the rest of the evening reading in bed. She fell asleep around 10:30 p.m., unaware that her apartment had already become the scene of something inexplicable. Or it wasn't until the following evening, when she sat down to review and edit the footage, that Rebecca Lawson's ordinary life took an extraordinary and terrifying turn. Rebecca almost didn't notice it. She was reviewing the footage on her laptop the following evening after work, making mental notes about which sections to trim and whether the lighting had been adequate. She'd done this dozens of times before. Watching herself on screen felt slightly embarrassing, but necessary for editing. She typically fast-forwarded through longer sections, watching at 1.5x speed to save time. At 14:37 in the footage, something made her pause. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't movement in the primary frame where she stood chopping butternut squash. It was something peripheral, barely perceptible. A shift in the shadows visible in the mirror that hung on her living room wall. The mirror was positioned to reflect her hallway, which connected her bedroom to the main living space. It appeared in the upper left corner of the frame, accounting for perhaps 5% of the total video composition. Rebecca rewound 10 seconds, watched again. Her stomach tightened. There, unmistakably, a shadow passed behind her bedroom door. It moved from left to right, visible for perhaps 2 seconds. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. She typically left it open about 6 inches when she was home. The shadow's movement suggested someone walking past the doorway from inside the bedroom toward her bathroom, which lay at the end of the short hallway. Rebecca's hands began to shake. She rewound again, watched at regular speed, slowed it to 0.5x. The shadow became even more distinct at reduced speed, definitively human in proportions, tall and solid, moving with deliberate purpose. It wasn't a trick of light shifting from outside her windows. The sun had already set when she filmed. Her apartment had been lit entirely by interior lights, which remained constant throughout the recording. What made the discovery most disturbing was the timing. When the shadow passed, Rebecca was clearly visible in the main frame, standing in her kitchen, approximately 20 feet from her bedroom. She was chopping vegetables, mid-sentence and discussing the book she'd read. She showed no awareness of anything amiss, no reaction whatsoever. If someone had been in her apartment, she had been completely oblivious to their presence. Rebecca's mind raced through logical explanations. Could it have been her own shadow somehow reflected at an odd angle? She stood up, walked around her apartment trying to recreate the effect with her phone's flashlight. No angle of light produced a shadow that moved independently behind her bedroom door while she stood in the kitchen. Could it have been an artifact of the camera? Some digital glitch? She examined the footage frame by frame. The shadow maintained consistent density and movement characteristics with normal physical objects. It didn't pixelate or flicker like digital corruption would. Could someone have broken in through her bedroom window? She checked the window. It was locked from inside, as it had been that evening. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor with no fire escape or ledge access. Reaching her bedroom window would require climbing equipment or suicidal recklessness. The most chilling aspect was what happened after the shadow passed. Rebecca continued watching the footage, her heart pounding. For the remaining 8 minutes of video, Nothing else unusual appeared. No shadow returned. No sounds were captured on the audio. Rebecca on-screen continued cooking, oblivious and content, eventually turning off the camera and presumably continuing her evening. If someone had been inside her apartment, they'd either remained hidden after passing behind the door, or they'd left without her noticing. But how? When? Through what exit? Rebecca sat in her apartment that evening, staring at the frozen frame on her laptop, the moment when shadow and reality intersected. Outside her windows, Minneapolis settled into November darkness. Inside, every creak of the building's old heating system made her flinch. She had double-checked her locks 3 times already. She hadn't eaten dinner. She couldn't stop watching those 2 seconds of footage, cycling through disbelief, fear, and a desperate hope that someone could explain what she was seeing. At 9:47 p.m., she called the police. The Minneapolis Police Department takes breaking and entering reports seriously, but Officer Marcus Williams admitted later that he approached Rebecca's call with skepticism. Home security videos frequently captured ambiguous images, shadows, reflections, environmental effects that residents interpreted as intruders. Most of these calls resulted in reassurance and education about common optical phenomena. Williams expected Rebecca's case to follow the same pattern when he arrived at her apartment on the evening of November 5th, accompanied by Officer Sarah Kim. Rebecca met them at her door, visibly anxious but articulate. She showed them the video on her laptop without preamble. Williams watched once, then asked to see it again. Kim leaned closer to the screen, studying the mirror reflection. They exchanged a glance. This wasn't nothing. Williams began a methodical investigation. He examined Rebecca's bedroom door and frame. No tool marks, no damage suggesting forced entry. He checked the window locks throughout the apartment. All secure. He asked Rebecca to walk him through her exact movements that evening, which she did with impressive recall. She showed him where she'd placed her camera, where she'd stood while cooking, how she'd positioned her furniture and mirrors. Kim interviewed Rebecca about her personal life. Any recent breakups? Yes, but 8 months prior, and it had been amicable. Any stalkers or uncomfortable situations at work? No. Had she noticed anything missing from her apartment? No. Any prior incidents of feeling watched or sensing an unwanted presence? No, never. The officers reviewed security footage from the building. The recordings confirmed Rebecca's account. She'd entered alone at 6:15 p.m. No one else had accessed the 3rd floor via the elevator or stairwell between 5 p.m. and midnight that day. The building had only 2 exit routes, both covered by cameras. No unauthorized persons appeared in any footage. This presented a logical impossibility. If someone had been in Rebecca's apartment, they'd either been inside before she arrived home, or they'd entered through a route that didn't exist. Williams decided to check Rebecca's previous videos. If this had been a one-time intrusion, it might be explainable, however unlikely. But if there was a pattern, that suggested something far more disturbing. Rebecca granted permission, and Williams spent the next hour reviewing footage she'd posted throughout October and early November. He found nothing suspicious, 16 videos total, ranging from 5 to 23 minutes in length. Clean footage, no anomalies, no shadows, no evidence of any presence besides Rebecca herself. Kim suggested reviewing even older content. Rebecca hesitated, then agreed. She'd been filming since early 2015, dozens of videos spanning nearly 2 years. Most she'd deleted after posting, keeping only recent content on her hard drive. But YouTube servers retained everything she'd ever uploaded to her private channel. They began a systematic review, starting with September 2016 and working backward. For 3 hours, Williams and Kim watched abbreviated versions of Rebecca's daily life, cooking, cleaning, getting ready for work, discussing movies and books. Rebecca sat nearby, increasingly uncomfortable with strangers scrutinizing these intimate recordings. At 12:47 a.m., Kim froze a video from August 22nd. "There," she said quietly. The video showed Rebecca doing laundry in her bedroom, folding clothes on her bed, while discussing a difficult conversation she'd had with her mother. At timestamp 8:14, visible in the same mirror reflection that would later capture the November incident, a shadow passed behind her bedroom door. Rebecca made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Williams marked the timestamp and continued reviewing. They found another instance on September 9th, another on October 1st. Each time, the shadow appeared in the mirror reflection while Rebecca remained oblivious, talking to her camera, living her life unaware that she was not alone. The pattern was unmistakable and deeply disturbing. Someone, or something, had been inside Rebecca's apartment repeatedly over months, moving through her space while she filmed, invisible to her direct perception, but captured by the camera's unblinking eye. Williams closed his notebook. "We need to escalate this." Detective Linda Reeves took over the case on November 7th, bringing 16 years of experience in crimes against persons and a reputation for thoroughness that bordered on obsessive. She began by questioning the building's superintendent, Harold Voss, a man in his 60s who'd maintained the property for 12 years. Voss insisted his master key system was secure. Only he and the property manager held copies. He produced logs showing no entry to Rebecca's apartment for maintenance during the relevant time frame. When Reeves asked to inspect the keys themselves, Voss complied immediately. Both keys were accounted for, and the locks on Rebecca's door showed no signs of tampering or unauthorized duplication. Reeves expanded her investigation to Rebecca's personal connections. She interviewed Rebecca's ex-boyfriend, Daniel Mercer, who'd ended their relationship the previous March. Mercer was cooperative and genuinely disturbed by the news. He provided an alibi for November 3rd. He'd been in Chicago for work, confirmed by hotel records and meeting attendance. Reeves found no evidence suggesting Mercer had maintained any access to Rebecca's apartment or any motive for harassment. She interviewed Rebecca's closest friends, her colleagues, even casual acquaintances who might have visited the apartment. Every person expressed shock. No one reported concerning behavior from Rebecca or mentioned anyone who might target her. Rebecca's life appeared remarkably drama-free. No debt, no legal troubles, no conflicts that might motivate someone to invade her privacy so persistently. The technical analysis proved equally frustrating. Reeves brought in a digital forensics specialist to examine Rebecca's videos for manipulation. The specialist, Thomas Park, spent days analyzing the footage frame by frame. His conclusion: the videos showed no signs of digital alteration. The shadows weren't added in post-production, weren't computer-generated effects, weren't the result of corrupted files or camera malfunction. Whatever had been captured was captured in real time during the original recording. Park did note something peculiar. The shadow appeared only in the mirror reflection, never in the direct frame. This suggested that whatever was moving behind Rebecca's bedroom door was positioned precisely to remain outside the camera's primary field of view while still being visible in the mirror's reflected angle. This level of spatial awareness, if it was a person, suggested detailed knowledge of Rebecca's filming setup. Reeves obtained a warrant to access the building's complete security history dating back 18 months. A team of officers reviewed hundreds of hours of footage from every camera covering entry points, hallways, and common areas. They found no evidence of anyone entering Rebecca's apartment during times corresponding with the shadow appearances. This impossibility gnawed at Reeves. Physical reality didn't allow for the scenario the evidence suggested. Repeated intrusions with no method of entry or exit, no physical traces, no witnesses, and no apparent motive. She considered exotic possibilities. Could someone be accessing the apartment through air ducts or crawl spaces? An HVAC specialist inspected the ventilation system. The ducts were far too small for human passage and showed no signs of disturbance. Could someone have created a false wall or hidden entrance? Reeves brought in a building inspector who used thermal imaging and density scanners to examine every wall, ceiling, and floor in Rebecca's apartment. The structure was solid, matching the original construction blueprints perfectly. Could the building superintendent be lying about the master keys? Reeves arranged for the locks on Rebecca's door to be changed without Voss's knowledge, then monitored whether any unauthorized attempts were made using the old keys. None were. By mid-November, Reeves faced a case that defied every conventional explanation. The evidence was irrefutable. Something had been in Rebecca's apartment repeatedly over months. But every investigative avenue led to a dead end. No means of entry, no physical evidence, no suspects, no motive. The case had attracted attention within the department, generating the kind of uncomfortable discussion that veterans typically avoid. Some officers suggested equipment malfunction despite the forensics report. Others whispered about possibilities they wouldn't include in official reports, supernatural explanations that had no place in criminal investigations. Reeves remained focused on evidence, but privately, she was beginning to consider questions she'd never confronted in her career. What do you do when reality doesn't align with the possible? Rebecca stopped sleeping in her apartment. By mid-November, she'd moved in with her friend Lauren, sleeping on a couch in the warehouse district while still paying rent on the apartment she could no longer bear to occupy. Detective Reeves understood. She'd seen this before with home invasion victims. The psychological violation often proved more damaging than any physical crime, but Reeves needed Rebecca to return, just once, for an experiment. On November 18th, they set up a comprehensive monitoring system in Rebecca's apartment. 6 high-definition cameras covered every angle of every room, with particular focus on the bedroom and hallway where the shadows had appeared. Motion sensors were placed throughout. A uniformed officer would remain in the building's lobby. Reeves herself would monitor the feeds from a vehicle in the parking lot. Rebecca would recreate her typical evening filming routine. She arrived at 6:30 p.m., visibly nervous. Reeves walked her through the setup, explaining how they'd capture anything that moved anywhere in the apartment. Rebecca nodded, understanding the logic, but clearly doubtful it would provide answers. At 6:45 p.m., Rebecca set up her personal camera in its usual position and began filming a routine evening video. She spoke to her camera about a new coffee shop she'd discovered, attempting normalcy while surrounded by surveillance equipment. Reeves watched from multiple angles simultaneously, 4 monitors displaying different perspectives of the apartment. For 43 minutes, nothing unusual occurred. Rebecca cooked dinner, talking to her camera in that familiar, intimate tone she'd cultivated over years of filming. Reeves observed her movements, the empty apartment, the play of shadows from normal lighting. Everything appeared mundane and explainable. Then, at timestamp 43:17 on Rebecca's personal camera, movement appeared in the mirror reflection. Reeves leaned forward, heart rate accelerating. The shadow passed behind the bedroom door exactly as it had in previous footage. Tall, distinct, moving with purpose. But here was the impossibility. 4 other camera angles simultaneously captured the hallway and bedroom from different perspectives. In those feeds, nothing moved. The hallway remained empty. The bedroom was still. Only in Rebecca's camera, in the specific angle of the mirror reflection, did the shadow appear. Reeves felt her skin prickle. She radioed the officer in the lobby to confirm no one had entered the building. Confirmed. She checked the motion sensors. None had triggered. The apartment was, by every objective measure except one camera angle, completely empty besides Rebecca. Rebecca hadn't noticed anything while filming, just as before. She continued her routine, unaware that Reeves was staring at monitors with growing disbelief. When Rebecca finished recording at 7:22 p.m., Reeves waited 10 minutes before entering the apartment with 2 uniformed officers. They searched every room, every closet, under furniture, behind curtains. The apartment was empty. Motion sensors confirmed no movement during the filming period except Rebecca's own activity. That evening, Reeves reviewed all 6 camera feeds simultaneously, correlating the timestamps. The shadow appeared only in Rebecca's camera, only in the mirror reflection, only during the window when Rebecca was actively filming for her channel. The other 5 cameras showed nothing. This should have been impossible. Shadows are produced by light interacting with physical objects. They don't selectively appear in specific recording devices. They don't observe camera angles. They don't possess awareness of what's being filmed and what's not. Yet the evidence suggested exactly that. Something that existed only in the specific context of Rebecca's personal filming. Something aware enough to position itself in the narrow slice of reflected space her camera captured. Something that avoided all other forms of observation and documentation. Reeves had been a detective long enough to know when evidence stopped making sense within conventional frameworks. This case had crossed that threshold. She had irrefutable documentation of something that shouldn't exist, captured by reliable technology and witnessed by trained observers. The question was no longer what had been in Rebecca's apartment. The question was, what kind of phenomenon could exist in such a specific, constrained way, visible only in reflection, only through one camera, only when particular conditions aligned? Reeves had no answers, and professionally, that terrified her. The Minneapolis Police Department closed Rebecca Lawson's case on December 20th, 2016, designating it unresolved due to insufficient evidence to support criminal investigation. Detective Reeves filed a final report that summarized the facts without attempting to explain them. Repeated appearances of an unidentified shadow in mirror reflections during video recordings, no evidence of forced entry or unauthorized access, no suspects identified, no threat to public safety established. The language was careful, professional, and deeply unsatisfying. Reeves included the November 18th surveillance footage in the case file, along with her observation that the anomaly appeared selectively in recording equipment. She stopped short of speculation about what this might mean, but her notes suggested avenues for investigation beyond police jurisdiction, perhaps parapsychology researchers, or technical experts specializing in optical phenomena. The file was archived. Officially, nothing criminal had occurred. Rebecca never returned to her apartment. She broke her lease in early December, paying the penalty fees without hesitation. The property manager re-rented the unit in January 2017 to a graduate student who lived there for 18 months without reporting any unusual incidents. Rebecca moved to Portland, Oregon, staying with her sister while rebuilding her sense of safety. She deleted her YouTube channel permanently, removing years of documentation of her daily life. She stopped filming herself entirely. No phone videos, no social media stories, nothing that might capture her image in that particular way again. When I reached out to her in 2024 for this story, she agreed to speak on the condition of anonymity. 8 years had provided some distance, though her voice still carried tension when discussing the incidents. The worst part wasn't seeing the shadow, she told me. It was realizing how many times it might have been there when I wasn't recording. How long had something been in my space without me knowing? The camera showed me what I couldn't see, but that meant I'd been blind to it for months, maybe longer. I started questioning everything. Every time I'd felt briefly unsettled in my apartment. Every moment I'd felt watched, but dismissed it as paranoia. What else had I missed? She paused, and I heard her take a breath. I don't film anymore. I don't even like looking at mirrors, and I never, ever live alone. Detective Reeves, now retired, remains troubled by the case. In 20 years of investigations, I saw a lot of things that challenged my assumptions about human behavior, she said. But this was different. This challenged assumptions about reality itself. We had good evidence of something that couldn't be explained by any framework I understood. That's not supposed to happen in police work. She's kept copies of the videos, sometimes reviewing them when cases of unexplained phenomena surface in the news. I still don't know what we documented, she admitted, but I know we documented something. The case raises questions that extend beyond one woman's experience. In an age where we constantly record ourselves, security cameras, phone videos, social media documentation, what might we be capturing that we don't consciously perceive? Are there phenomena that exist only in the liminal space between direct observation and technological recording? Do our devices see things we cannot? Rebecca's videos captured something that existed in reflection, that moved through space without triggering motion sensors, that appeared only when specific conditions aligned. Was it an intruder with impossible knowledge and capabilities? A glitch in the way recording equipment processes reflected light? Or something stranger, an entity that exists between perception and documentation, visible only when we're not looking directly? We may never know. But Rebecca's experience reminds us that the most unsettling mysteries aren't always the ones we search for in haunted houses or abandoned asylums. Sometimes they're in our own homes, moving through our spaces, existing just outside our direct awareness, waiting to be seen in a reflection, captured by a camera, preserved in footage we almost didn't review. The shadow passed behind the door. Rebecca didn't notice, until she did.